Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Today at St John's Highbridge, we are celebrating Harvest. Harvest is an interesting festival for many of us. While from Highbridge we do not need to travel too far before we find ourselves surrounded by wonderful farmland, many of us do feel increasingly detached from the land which provides our food. With the global market enabling us to eat food in and out of season, it can be tempting to wonder whether celebrating harvest at all is relevant in our modern world. Our distance from the source of our food means that in the affluent Western world, we emerge relatively unscathed from a poor harvest. We might notice the absence of a particular product in our usual supermarket, but the chances are the store will manage to find a different source for the product. While we cannot deny that we are becoming increasingly distant from the source of our food, the emphasis at Harvest on gratitude, thanksgiving, trust, and acknowledging that God is our ultimate provider are core to the practice of the Christian faith. And I think this is, at least in part, what Jesus is seeking to share with us in our reading from Luke's Gospel, which I will share with you now. Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, "What should I do, for I have no place to store my crops?" Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich towards God." He said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens, they neither sow nor reap, they have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your span of life? If then you are not able to do so small a thing as that, why do you worry about the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not keep striving for what you are to eat and what you are to drink, and do not keep worrying. For it is the nations of the world that strive after all these things, and your Father knows that you need them." Harvest is an important moment despite our modern detachment from the land, because it reminds us that there is much in our lives for which we can be grateful and thankful. And when it comes to the fulfillment of one of our most basic human needs, food, our gratitude should take us back to God. Harvest is a time to rejoice in the gifts of God, whether a poor or plentiful crop has been gathered. In his second letter to the church in Corinth, the New Testament reading set for today, Paul closes the passage with the words, Thanks be to God for his indescribable gift. Gratitude for God's generosity is at the heart of the Christian faith. And as we celebrate the Festival of Harvest today and hold our annual meeting, we are reminded to give thanks to God despite the challenges we face, both as individuals and as a church. Our experience over the last 6 months or more has placed great strain on human resources and understanding. Many of us have been stretched to our limit, and because we cannot see an end to this time of uncertainty, that strain is ongoing. It is tricky and it is painful. Yet, in our gospel reading, we heard the words of Jesus as he tells his followers not to worry. Do not worry. I wonder how much of your time over these last 6 or 7 months has been spent worrying. Worrying perhaps about people, about yourself, your family, your friends. Worrying about finances, job security, pensions, the long-term economic consequences of this year. And even perhaps, if you're anything like me, worrying about all the things that you don't know, and as a consequence you aren't yet worrying about. Worrying about worrying. On Monday and Tuesday of this week, our eldest daughter Martha had what we determined to be a new and continuous cough. So on Tuesday lunchtime, my wife Sarah took her off to Bristol Airport for a COVID test, and we began as a family the necessary time of isolation. In those first few days, we were concerned that Martha may have the virus and the implications for her and for us. Do not worry, says Jesus. As the following few days passed, Martha's cough gradually reduced, but we had to wait patiently for the results of her test. We felt increasingly sure that it was just a seasonal cough and cold. It was tough. We were impatient. But we're not scientists, and while her symptoms had reduced, she could still have the virus, and it would be highly irresponsible to risk passing it on to others. During that time of waiting, it was hard not to worry, both about Martha's health, but also about the people we had spent time with in the days before Martha's cough had developed, and the commitments that we, but especially I, have in the coming weeks. Next week I am leading 3 funerals. And of course we needed to add into the mix our own personal anxieties and fears. Do not worry, Jesus says. In these words, do not worry, Jesus is reassuring the disciples and us today of God's care. God cares for each of us. We do not need to worry about the basics. God knows what we need. God knows what is important. But this is also about trust. When we look at the parable, the rich man, described as a fool by Jesus, builds bigger barns to accumulate and store, while Jesus encourages his disciples, his followers, simply not to worry. Trusting God is hard. I have really found that out myself this week. Trusting God is hard. The Festival of Harvest is an annual reminder to trust in the provision of God, even when we have a poor crop before us. Our annual meeting is another reminder to be thankful and to recognise the faithfulness of God that sustains our trust in Him. Here at St John's Highbridge this year, we have the opportunity to connect our trust, gratitude, and the faithfulness of God in a new way. And that, perhaps, coming in this time of great loss and uncertainty, might well be counted as one of God's indescribable gifts to us. Amen.